Hi, this is Boki, and today I'm going to be talking about podcasts for people who like books. But over the past few years, podcasts have gotten, I think, increasingly popular, and kind of like with YouTube and blogs, what's great about podcasts is there's kind of one for everything. Like I listen to podcasts about my favorite trashy reality TV shows, about the news, about science, about books. So yeah, really there's a podcast for almost any interest that you might have. So the podcasts that I'm going to be talking today are, like I said, for book people. They're not necessarily about books, though most of them are, but they might be kind of storytelling podcasts or have a lot of information related to books or pop culture in general. So yeah. So starting off with one of my favorite podcasts is Pop Culture Happy Hour. This is a weekly podcast put out by NPR. It's a 4-person panel discussion, usually hosted by Linda Holmes, and they basically just discuss pop culture for like 30 to 40 minutes. The episodes are usually broken into 3 sections. The first 2 are a discussion on some kind of topic for the week, and then the third one is their What's Making Us Happy. And so the discussion sections I really enjoy because they kind of touch on a lot of different types of topics from week to week. Sometimes it'll be a discussion about a movie that just came out, or they'll talk about kind of a general theme like endings or like posthumously like appreciated works. So there's just a wide range of discussions. They cover things like movies, TV, books, games, just a lot of different types of pop culture. So I really like it for kind of the breadth of discussion types and the examples that are brought up. And their third section, What's Making Us Happy this week, is really nice because it's just a great way to find out about different things going on like in pop culture, different TV shows that you might not have known about or that you may have heard about and that the panelist is like just getting excited about. Another thing that I really appreciate is that the editing is really good. So a lot of podcasts that are kind of these discussion type podcasts will go on for quite a while. And I've listened to other pop culture podcasts that have much longer run times, and they're very good, but for me it's not what I'm looking for. I think having those kinds of loose discussions, I find it very easy to zone out. So I mentioned the editing, but also the moderating as part of this. The discussions move along very quickly, but with kind of just enough time to get a little bit in depth and learn some more. So next up, I've mentioned in a few of my videos that I really like listening to podcasts that have interviews with writers, and there's a few of them out there that cover different types of writers. The one that I'm going to kind of go more in depth right now is called the Longform Podcast. So this is an interview usually with journalists or people who are writing some form of long-form journalism. And I really like it because you learn a lot about how people got into writing and how their process now works. And sometimes they'll actually get really in-depth into a specific article, so you can kind of understand how the writer went about researching their article and putting it together, which can cover a wide range of experiences because there's so many different types of journalists that they're talking to. One of the ones that was really memorable for me was an interview with Adrienne Chen, who had written an article about a former member who was really high up in the Westboro Baptist Church. She was basically the person who was writing their Twitter account, which is, full of love and joy. So he had an interview with her because she had kind of through that Twitter actually come to realize that she was no longer in agreement with a lot of the church's beliefs. Another episode that really stood out for me was the interview with Cheryl Strayed, the author of Wild and Tiny Beautiful Things. That interview actually made me go pick up Tiny Beautiful Things, and I still want to read Wild. So the next podcast I want to talk about is an audio drama. A lot of audio drama podcasts are kind of becoming increasingly well known. Welcome to Night Vale might be one of the most famous. And my personal favorite right now is The Bright Sessions. So The Bright Sessions is set in a therapist's office, and it's ostensibly her recordings that we're listening to. And what you realize over the course of these, very quickly in these recordings, is that Dr. Bright, she is working with patients who are not normal in ways that are, like, physically impossible. Basically, they have powers, right? So they have, some people might be psychic, some have the ability to time travel, others are, like, immensely empathetic, just a lot of different types of powers. And you get, basically, recordings of her with different patients over the course of time. And it's really interesting to see how these episodes or basically these like recordings fit together to paint a picture of the patients, of Dr. Bright, and kind of this ongoing story that builds up. And what you slowly start to learn is that Dr. Bright clearly has some kind of ulterior motive, and whether or not she's being completely honest with her patients and what her motives are for helping them, I think are still unfolding. She seems to have a lot of good things going for her, but then there's also a lot of secrets that she's withholding. And so I really like this podcast because the story is really interesting. I think the pacing is really good, and also the acting is pretty good. There's some audio dramas where the voice acting is like, it's not bad, but it just has some moments of cringiness that even if I like the story, it definitely takes me out of it for the moment. Another podcast that's kind of that's a storytelling podcast is the Myths and Legend podcast. So the host, Jason, he basically every episode or kind of every couple episodes, he's covering a major legend or folktale from some culture. He has kind of a wide range of cultures that he's covering. These are things like Russian folklore, Japanese, even things like kind of English urban legends from the 1800s. There's a wide range of stories that he's covering. And what I really like is that a lot of times, when you have a legend from a particular culture, there's different versions of the legend, or there's kind of fragmented sources. And so in the podcast, he actually does a lot of work to build a story out of whatever sources he has, but he also takes the time to acknowledge when he's making changes. The next podcast is my current obsession. It's one of those things that I am like telling everybody that I know as when it's appropriate, because it's called My Dad Wrote Porno, which means it's not always appropriate for me to tell everybody that I know. So as you can guess from the title, this is not a podcast that's safe for work. You should probably listen to it with headphones on if you're in public. I guess you should listen to any podcast with headphones on if you're in public. So the basis of the show is that the host, Jamie, his dad wrote a porno. He wrote an erotic novel, novella. And so Jamie is basically sitting around a kitchen table, and each episode he is reading a chapter of it out loud to his friends. And it's funny on multiple levels. I mean, well, 2 levels basically. There's the point where, he's reading a story that was written by his dad that's incredibly explicit. Like, that's kind of one level of, like, disturbing. The second level of disturbing is just the actual content. Just like a very skewed understanding of how the human body works, especially female anatomy. It's not quite clear. The anatomy, and like it almost feels like sci-fi, because the human body in this book does not work the way that the human body in reality like works. And even just like the setup for all of the super sexy scenes are super awkward and makes the super sexy scenes super unsexy. And yeah, it's just hysterical. So then he's reading these chapters out loud. The friends and him, like, they're all just kind of falling apart. It's just really funny. And it's kind of like those hate reads that people would do of 50 Shades of Grey, but without the hate. Like, it's filled with love, but also confusion. The book that they're talking about is an actual book that you can get. It's called Belinda Blinked, so if you want to read that, yeah, you can do that. You can also listen to the podcast. I might buy it because I feel like I've listened to this podcast multiple times already, so maybe I should just go ahead and buy the book. So my last podcast, this is maybe the most book-specific podcast. This is called Get Booked. It's part of the Book Riot family of podcasts. It's hosted by Amanda and Jen, and it's basically a recommendation podcast. So people will write in requests for different types of books. So maybe they're kind of going through a major life change, and they want a book about that, or they want a book that has nothing to do with that, or they just read a certain book and want more like it. So in each episode, they'll go through a few of these requests and each suggest a few books. And when I started listening to this podcast, I was in a book riot. I think I actually mentioned this in a previous video. Listening to this podcast, I got a lot of different ideas for different books to read. I think if you look through some of the books that I've read over the past few months, well, I've only posted for a few weeks, but even in those, in that list of books, you'll see that a lot of the books that I've been reading are actually from this podcast. And it's just really helped me discover a lot of new authors, a lot of new books. They're clearly drawing on a wide knowledge of books. So I really appreciate this podcast because it's really helped me. And I really love it every week when it comes out. I feel like each episode comes out and I immediately place like 50 holds at the library. So yeah, those are my podcast recommendations, but I'm always looking for more podcasts. So if you have any that you really love, let me know below. I always have time for more podcasts. So bye.